to introduce Lloyd. Lloyd Smith has done 130 manual speeches. 130 speeches. So he's had lots of experience with speeches that did and didn't go his way. Several times in the past, including for one entire competent communication manual, he's redone speeches to make them just right. Contest speeches are a special case. Lloyd has been in 10 speech contest cycles, and for each of them, he lived with his speeches for 3 months or more, revisiting and polishing each one of them many times. However, sometimes, even the successful ones could have been better. Tonight for Project 1, the entertaining speech from the Advanced Communication Series, the entertaining speaker, Lloyd will revisit his first humorous speech contest entry, which placed second at the 2009 District 9 Fall Conference. Lloyd Smith with a revised version of Big John and the Atomic Twinkie.
When the elevator door slid open, a big guy standing in the hallway stuck his hand out at me and said, "Call me Big John." Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, that was how I met one of my new neighbors on the 5th floor of George Pierce Hall at what was then called Eastern Washington State College in the fall of 1966. There's no chance that you ever met Big John, but if you ever lived in a college dorm or any other kind of communal housing for young people, you probably met somebody just like him. Big John was aggressively friendly and totally oblivious to the notions of privacy and personal property. His worst trait was that he was a food mooch. Whenever he came into one of our dorm rooms, which he did frequently uninvited, if there was anything edible in sight, he would grab it and stuff it in his mouth. After he got it down, he always said exactly the same thing. "Hey, can I have a little bite of that?" Yuck, yuck, yuck. After a few weeks, everyone was completely fed up with Big John and his antics. It occurred to me that some special remedial education was a good idea for Big John. I thought about it for a little while and realized that the humble Hostess Twinkie, that golden epitome of the American culinary experience, would be the perfect instructional aid. That's because Twinkies are filled with some kind of white goo that can easily be removed and replaced with something much more educational. I even had the tool to do the replacement. When my roommate Gary had his wisdom teeth out the previous summer, they'd given him a big plastic syringe to use to squirt water around the incisions to keep them clean so they heal faster. The question was, what should I use to replace the white goo inside the Twinkie? I got that answered for me the next weekend when several of us decided to have our Sunday dinner at the new Chinese restaurant that had just opened in Cheney. That was my first experience with screaming hot Chinese mustard. The second I tasted that stuff, I knew I had found my Twinkie filling. On our way out of the restaurant, I sort of borrowed a little dish of mustard, and on the way into the dorm, I bought a Twinkie out of the vending machine in the downstairs lounge. Up in our room, Gary locked the door and I got to work. I carefully extracted the white goo from the Twinkie and then injected the mustard. Now back then, men were real men and Twinkies were bigger than they are now. So I could get about 2 tablespoons of that Chinese mustard inside the Twinkie. When I finished, I put it on a paper towel, set it on the corner of my desk, and Gary unlocked our door to set the trap. Within a couple of minutes, there was Big John in the doorway. His gaze locked on the Twinkie. 2 quick steps brought him within range. As he reached for it, I said, "You better not eat that." But he just sneered at me, grabbed the Twinkie, and stuffed the entire thing in his mouth. For 3 or 4 seconds, I thought nothing was going to happen. But then he stopped chewing suddenly. His eyes bugged open, and his neck and head began to turn red, just like in a cartoon. He started looking panicked and started flapping his arms. The Chinese mustard had temporarily paralyzed his tongue and larynx, and he couldn't spit it out or say anything. He started making a chirping noise, kind of like a smoke detector with a bad battery. And then he suddenly turned and ran out of the room. Gary and I leaped up to chase him in order to see the rest of the show. I think he was trying to get to the drinking fountain in the hallway, but the toxic Twinkie had disrupted his internal navigation system, and he missed it. George Pierce Hall is a cylinder. The student rooms are on the outside, and the central core has the laundry room and bathrooms and elevator and whatnot. That means the hallways are like donuts. As he went around the bend, he was ricocheting back and forth on the walls, and people started coming out of their doors to find out what the sound was. It got quieter as he went around the loop, and then got louder as he came around on the other side. His circumnavigation of the 5th floor had not improved his condition. When he got to the bathroom, he shouldered his way through the door. And for the next several minutes, we could hear one of the sinks running full blast while Big John made horrible gagging and strangling sounds inside. Everybody gathered out in the hall to find out what had happened. Gary and I were explaining the toxic Twinkie to them. When Big John came out of the bathroom, he was quite a sight. His hair was wet and matted. He had Twinkie goo smeared down the front of his sodden sweatshirt. And his face was a horrible zombie greenish gray, except for his bright red lips. He looked at me and he said, "Arrgh!" He still couldn't talk because of the effects of the mustard. Gary said, "Hey man, he told you not to eat it," and everybody laughed. That's when Big John said something that was probably not complimentary and stomped off to his room. At the end of fall quarter, we lost Big John. He didn't die, he just moved up to the 11th floor. But by then, he had a new nickname which lasted the rest of his days at Eastern. Big John had become the Twinkie.